Hello, we have prepared this video to explain the electrocardiographic expression of obstructions in the left anterior descending coronary artery that are located after the first septal branch and before the first diagonal branch. As explained in previous videos, in ischemia produced by an occlusion of the left anterior descending coronary artery, there are four major locations of the obstructions, each of them resulting in a characteristic electrocardiographic pattern. In this video, we explain the electrocardiogram of LED obstructions located after the first septal branch and before the first diagonal branch. Critical in the understanding of the electrocardiogram of LED occlusions and their impact and the extent of myocardium at ischemic risk is the direction of the ST deviation vector in the frontal plane. In occlusions that are proximal to both the first septal and the first diagonal branches, the ST segment is depressed in all the three inferior leads because the ST deviation vector has a superior direction. For occlusions after the first septal branch and before the first diagonal branch, the ST deviation vector is displaced to a more horizontal direction, so that it is more negative in lead 3 than in lead 2, and even in lead 2 it may be isoelectric. Finally, for occlusions that are distal to both the first septal and the first diagonal branch, we can observe two forms of ST deviation vectors. The most frequent form is represented by those cases in which the ST deviation vector is almost perpendicular in direction to the frontal plane, so that the ST segment is not depressed in any of the three inferior leads. Less frequently, the ST deviation vector has an inferior direction, and in these cases we will observe an ST elevation in the inferior leads. The ST deviation vector gives us an idea of the area of ventricular myocardium that is at risk. The more superior the ST deviation vector, the larger the area of ventricular myocardium at risk, and the greater the benefit of an immediate restoration of the coronary flow. Left anterior descending obstructions distal to the first septal branch but proximal to the first diagonal coronary artery produce ST segment elevations from V1 to V4 and also in leads 1 and AVL, and ST segment depressions in the inferior leads 2, 3 and ABF. Characteristically, in these patients, the ST segment depression is more evident in lead 3 than in lead 2. In fact, in lead 2 in some of these patients may be the ST segment isoelectric. We see here a detail of leads V1 and V2 where we can appreciate that the J point is elevated 1.1 millimeters above the isoelectric line in lead V1 and 4.2 millimeters in lead V2. In this screen we have taken the TP segment as a marker for the isoelectric line. The J point in lead 2 is 1.1 millimeters below this isoelectric line, whereas in lead 3 the J point is minus 2 millimeters in relation to the baseline. We want to re-emphasize that in patients that have an obstruction in the left anterior descending coronary artery that is distal to the first septal coronary artery but proximal to the first diagonal branch, that the ST segment is more depressed in lead 3 than in lead 2. Here we show the electrocardiogram of our patient plus the left coronary arteriography. The yellow arrow signals the location of the thrombus in the left anterior descending coronary artery. We see that the localization of the thrombus was after the origin of the first septal branch, but before the origin of the first diagonal branch. In the post-PTCA frame, we see that there was an additional severe obstruction in the left circumflex coronary artery that was approached during a second procedure. In summary, in obstructions of the left anterior descending coronary artery that are distal to the first septal branch but proximal to the takeoff level of the first diagonal branch, the ST segment is elevated from V1 to V4, but also characteristically in leads 1 and AVL. And the ST segment is depressed in the inferior leads, but in lead 3 more depressed than in lead 2. In fact, in lead 2 it may be, in some instances, isoelectric. Watch more videos on acute coronary syndromes in ECG Corner, and also read the contents in this website referring to this problem. Thank you very much for your attention.